Hello, Mr. Ben.
How are you doing?
Good. Sorry, I was away for a bit.
No, you're good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
when I
mhm.
got back last week, I realized, oh, I actually have to do all the work that I didn't do when I was away.
Yeah, yeah. Things usually stack up after you're on vacation.
Yeah,
You come
yeah.
down back to earth.
Yup. Um, so last, so when we finished up, you finished up that Sicha on Shemot, I realized that in the Sichas, the Rebbe doesn't like he just skips over things and makes references to a lot of things that are kind of like fundamental, and everybody he kind of assumes that everybody who's familiar with Chabad or you know would be familiar with them, and a lot of them are not things people are familiar with.
Mhm.
And so I thought what might be good is to intersperse the sichot with some basic maimarim that explain some subjects. And I don't know if this is going to do what I think it's going to do, but I'm hope it's going to do what I think it's going to do.
Mhm.
And this mimer, so um, mimer ma'amar um, is a is considered more of an in-depth and spiritual treatment than just a sicha, which is basically the Rebbe would speak extemporaneously.
Right.
And what happened was that in 1950, when the previous Rebbe, who's the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe's father-in-law passed away, the last mimer that he um, gave was Baati L'Gani, which uh, the title refers to a verse in Song of Songs. I have come into my garden,
Mhm.
Baati L'Gani. Um, and so what the Rebbe did the following year was uh, start with that same concept, and as opposed to simply rehearsing a the mimer that the previous Rebbe had given over, he gave over his own. So this is basically kind of like the Rebbe's inaugural speech when he became officially Rebbe a year after the previous Rebbe died.
Got it. And can you give me context as to like what, like in what context does the Rebbe give a speech like a mimer, and what, like, why is it? What is, yeah, and Sicha? What's the context around those events?
Well, um, Ma'amarim tend to be more um, formal.
Hmm.
They will be for official events. There are certain nigunim which are sang before and after ma'amarim, right? Um, whereas anything the Rebbe says could be a sicha. When the
Right.
Rebbe would give a speech on a Torah subject, his secretaries would record it. On Shabbat, they would memorize it. And then after Shabbat, they would they would go ahead and they would go ahead and write it down. And a mimer usually was more prepared, and oftentimes would be prepared for publication. And some Hasidim memorize them. And so, for example, there's a bar mitzvah mimer, which Chabad bar mitzvah boys often will recite by heart. And unfortunately, it's mostly Yiddish.
It's not enough the parsha. You also need to memorize the.
So my rabbi, with each of his sons, for their bar mitzvah, they make a siyum on the entirety of the Mishnah, which takes them a good 4 or 5 years to finish. And they recite the bar mitzvah mimer, and they go up for their parsha. I don't know if they end up chanting the parsha, but they may. A few children of grand rabbis, Hasidic grand rabbis. There was one YouTube video recently that the child of one of the big Hasidic dynasties, his son or his grandson, who's expected to be next in line, at age 13, made a siyum on the entirety of the Talmud. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Big shoes to fill. So, yeah. And so, Ma'amarim, so for example, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Hasidim by now have Baati L'Gani, as it's called in Yiddish, memorized. Also, the last mimer that the Rebbe left, Atat Tzaveh. Hey, Zacharias, Atat Tzaveh, the people who aren't crazy, on the Rebbe's yard site every year will learn it. So Maimarim are more actual recitations that people will learn and study over and over again. Whereas a sicha, I mean, there are sichas, people have favorite sichas. I have favorite sichas that like I've probably spoken about several times, but the character is just very different. I would say that kind of like the difference between an essay and a research paper, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Or a newspaper article and a magazine article, maybe. Yeah. So this is, and the links are in the description below. There's there's the English version, and then there's the Hebrew and Yiddish version. And hopefully there won't be too much Yiddish, and we'll be able to get through it, because my Yiddish is almost non-existent. But if necessary, the English version is there. So, yeah.
Same here. My English is comprised of my time growing up but spending in New York. I think I learned more Yiddish than I learned in Israel. So
yeah. Okay, so let's start. B'siyata dishmaya bet samach daled Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph. So this was in the 10th of Shvat, which is the month before Adar, in 5711. And that was 1951. Kotev Kvod Kodsho Kedushas Morenu Chotnenu Admor, so wrote his Kavod Kodsho, his holiness, I guess you could say, our teacher and our father-in-law. So the sixth Rebbe was the father-in-law of the seventh Rebbe, and there was an older son-in-law who for a while vied to be the next Rebbe, but that didn't happen. Admor, Adonenu Morenu Rabbeinu, and that's how in Hebrew Hasidim refer to what is oftentimes translated as Grand Rabbi, which it's the best word for it, but I usually just use the word term Rebbe. B'ma'amaro leyom histalkuto, in his mamar that he had prepared on the day of his passing, Yud Shvat Hey Shin Yud Tet. And Chassidim have a funny custom of changing the year order to make it sound nicer than it actually is. And that's what he's doing here. It's he means 5710, but yeah, that's why that's backwards. Baati L'Gani Achoti Kala. So this is a verse. This is Shir Hashirim 5:1. I have come to my garden, my sister, my beloved bride. Ve'ita b'midrash Rabbah b'makomo, and there is in the midrash Rabbah regarding this verse, L'gan ein kativ kan ela l'gani, l'ganuni. It doesn't say I have come to a garden. It says I have come to my garden, meaning l'ganuni, meaning that place which is my dwelling place. Lamakom shahaya ikari betchila, in the place that I was most essentially at the very beginning. The ikar shchina betachtonim haita, that the main aspect of the shchina, and funny enough, this gets into things we were discussing last night in the Bible study, is its aspect of being in the lower realms. That is, so we talk about kucha brichu shchinte, we talk about the masculine and the feminine aspects of holiness. The masculine aspect is Ein Sof Baruch Hu, is that thing that is infinite and intangible and completely ineffable. And then we talk about that aspect of God, the Shekhinah, which is the feminine aspect, which is the aspect which is most, which is the lower part, which is the part that dwells within us. Clear?
Yeah, and just a question about like the Baati L'Gani Achoti Kala. Achoti, is it relevant for us? Because I don't have knowledge of that pasuk, like the Achoti Kala. Is it relevant for this, the Achoti Kala? Because I wouldn't know what that.
Yeah, we're not. So Shir Hashirim just basically is it's a love story on its most low resolution level. It's a love story between a king and his wife. But it refers to the relationship between Israel and God, and the relationship between Kucha Brichu Shchinte.
So the higher and the lower.
Right. So so there are three canonical relationships that we have towards God.
Right.
Parent and child, master and slave, and husband and wife, right? And so Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, or sometimes called Song of Solomon, Asher U'Shlomo, because it says which is to Solomon, is it's a love song between husband and wife, and that's where so here, I mean, the Rebbe is starting with what the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke about, and he's going to go on to talk about one particular aspect. So we don't necessarily have to go into the original mimer. I mean, we could, but yeah, he's starting off with basically a summation of that mimer.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. Ad kan lashona. So far he was just reciting what the Frierdiker Rebbe said, and now this is where he starts actually ulahaven diuk halashon ikar shchina, and to understand why precisely it says ikar shchina, right? The essential aspect, the main aspect of the shchina. Hine bepirush shchina mevar kavod kedushas admor hazakain. So the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidus, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who wrote the Tanya and the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So so in order to understand what it means that when we talk about Ikar Shechina, we have to first start by remembering what the Alter Rebbe said about the word Shechina. Shenikra Shechina, that it is called a Shechina, al shem sheshochenet umitlabeshet milashon v'shachanti betocha. That because it dwells and it becomes enclosed, it encloses itself from a language of, in the Torah it says, Asuli mikdash v'shochanti betocha. Make for me a temple, and I will dwell amongst them. Shehu reshit hitgalut or ein sof. Because the Shekhinah is the beginning of the revelation of the infinite light, right? We have the light as it is in the sun before it has been emanated from the sun, where it cannot be distinguished from the sun itself. But then the light extends when it starts extending from the sun itself, right? That's when it can be recognized as something other than the sun itself. And this is the first emanation, right? God in his ineffable and completely, atzmut umahut, the God's essence, and then there is what the Eastern Orthodox would call the energies of God, right? The first emanations of God, atzilut, right? And that is the beginning of that is the beginning of Shekhinah, of starting to dwell, right?
Yeah. It's very interesting that the word mitlabeshet makes me think of I have so many questions about the word enclothed. Because I don't know, like, what is it in clothing? Like, is it taking shape? Kind of like if you think about the sun, then so the shadow is like makes us like this is So I don't know if.
So okay, so think of a person and their clothing, right? And then imagine that that person is infinite and the clothing shatters, right? Because that person is so much beyond their clothing that the clothing itself cannot withstand them.
Right.
I sometimes think of like one of those really buff guys wearing a t-shirt and then like he flexes and boom, right? And so there's a similar idea of talking about Or Ein Sof and the Kelim, right? In Seder Hishtalshalut and Shvirat HaKelim, right? So Or Ein Sof first created the Kelim, right? And Keli means vessel, but it can also mean like cloth, and it can also mean a garment, okay? That's why they're also called tikkunim, right? And so the Eser tikkunin, the sfirot, the Or Ein Sof started being allowed into the Eser sfirot, and the three highest sfirot, Chabad, were able to withstand the light, but the lower sfirot, the six midot, shattered, and Malchut cracked, whatever that means. Okay? And the avoda of birur, of tikkun, right? And in a Kabbalistic sense, this is the entire avoda of a person, is to help reconstitute the kelim, because just like if you take a piece of pottery and break it, and then you glue it back together, it'll actually be stronger than it was before it broke. So in a similar way, I mean, these are all analogies, obviously, but in a similar way, we will end up with kelim, which will be able to withstand the light within them. And
within
so,
them, or is reflected from above.
the light comes from that which is beyond and fills the kelim. And there's a lot of things. I mean, inyan hitlapshut or bekelim, like, we could get into this forever. But just to explain some of the basic inyanim, some of the basic concepts. So just as when your clothing, they reveal something about you, but they also hide something about you, right?
Yeah.
And since it is impossible for us to look at God directly, in a sense, we can take all those pieces of cloth that have fallen on the ground, reconstitute them, and get some concept of the shape of the clothing of God. Right? So that is what we mean when we talking about the livushim, right? They are not God. Just like your name, it captures something about you, right? When I say Ben to somebody else who knows you, right, it's a reference to you, but what's a name and what is actual you, right?
Yeah.
And in a similar manner, the both the shamot, the names, and the kelim are mere tiny reflections of Ein Sof Baruch Hu.
Yeah, but they are the first, like it says here, like they're the first, like you said, the first thing that emanates.
The Shekhinah, right? The ikar, the whole aspect of being Shechina, right, is it's hitgalut. Maybe we should actually get into Petichat Eliyahu. Have we ever gone through a Petichat Eliyahu together?
No, I don't think so.
Let's pull up the Tikkunei Zohar. Okay, so Tikkunei Zohar 17.
So what is Tikkunei Zohar?
So the Tikkunei Zohar is an addendum to the Zohar. It's printed at the back of the Zohar, and so what we know about so everything we know about Chokhmat HaNistar, the Kabbalah, right? So for a very, very long time, for thousands of years, it was prohibited to speak about a lot of these things in public at all. Until the Arizal, about 500 years ago, was given permission by Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, to reveal certain things. And since then, there has been an incredible revelation of things that for many years was only studied. The Mishnah says that there are things you can only teach in front of 3 people, things you can only teach in front of 2 people, things you can only teach in front of 1 person, and things you cannot teach even in front of 1 person. And so why 3 people? Because if you have 3 students and you're teaching 1 student, the other 2 may, and it's an important or confusing subject, the other 2 may start talking to each other and make some sort of mistake. So some subjects you cannot even teach in front of 3 students. 2 students, because one of them might be afraid to ask in front of you, or you might be explaining to the other one and he might understand. So you can only teach to 1 student. And then there are things which even to 1 student, you can't actually teach it, but that person has to understand to the capacity that they have to understand. And historically, we've known this to be true for thousands of years, and this has obviously been true that for a good 2,000 years, there were texts and there were secrets which were taught only among those who were worthy of them, and in specific groups, not taught to just anyone. And what happened with the Arizal and his students is that permission was given that these things could be widely revealed in ways that they never were before. And then, since then, the Baal Shem Tov and his students have revealed many things, and other rabbis have been able to reveal many things. And the obvious question becomes, okay, this rabbi comes and says, I'm revealing to you secrets from thousands of years ago. How do we know that these are the secrets from thousands of years ago? And the answer is, we know because it perfectly is in line and is a continuation and an explanation of everything that we have been taught before, right? It does not contradict anything that is in part of the what's called the Chokhmat HaNigla, right? So there's Nigla and Nistar. There's what is revealed and what was hidden. So is the Nigla? It's things like scriptures and halacha, things that that are shaveh lechol nefesh, that anyone can go ahead and study. And then there are things which are advanced subjects which not everybody can understand, but they are only, but to the degree that anyone would explain them to somehow contradict what is nigla, what is in the scripture, what is in the halacha, what is our tradition, then we know that it's not actually true. And we only believe those things which completely coincide with what we were taught before.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this particular part of the Tikkunei Zohar, which is one of these Kabbalistic texts which has been revealed over the past 500 years, has become, because after the revelations of the Arizal revealed certain ways of praying that were not really known widely before then. And after those revelations, pretty much every single Jewish community, with a few minor exceptions, changed their liturgy in certain ways by adding things, by refining things. I mean, obviously, the liturgy is in its essential form the same as it has been for 2,000 years. I would say 2,500 years. But the certain things were added to the prayers, including, for example, the entirety of Kabbalat Shabbat, right? So Lecha Dodi, which you will hear in almost every single synagogue. There are a few Yemenite synagogues which don't sing Lecha Dodi on Friday afternoon. That was composed by a student of the Arizal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this particular part of Tikkunei Zohar, it's known as Patach Eliyahu or Petichat Eliyahu, is one of the things that has become, a lot of people recite it daily. It's printed in many sidurim, and it's one of the things that has been revealed over the past 500 years so widely that it's printed in almost every sidur. Okay. So Patach Eliyahu v'amar. So Elijah started and said, Ribon almin da'ant hu chad v'la b'chushban. So this is in Aramaic. So master of the world, who is one but not counted. Ant hu ila'a al kol ila'in. You are above, greater and above than all things. Setima al kol setimin. You are hidden upon all that is hidden. Late machshava tefisa bach klal. There, no thought can possibly grasp you. Ant hu apik kat asar tikunin. You are the one who brought forth the 10 tikunin, vessels, garments, however you want to translate that. They say they have rectifications here. Karinan lon asar sfiran, and you called them the 10 sfirot. La'anhaga bahon almin stinin the la itkalyan, the almin the itkalyan, to command through them the worlds that are hidden and have not been revealed, and those worlds which have been revealed. Uvhon it kasyat mibnei nasha, and through them you are hidden from from human beings, right? So there is the so like we were talking about garments, how they hide and reveal at the same time, right? There are things that you can't personally directly observe, but you can observe their impact on other things,
Mhm.
right? In a similar way, while we obviously nobody can see God and live, there is a possibility of looking at the kaviyachol garments of God, and in some way it hides God and it reveals God, right? It hides God so we can look towards Him, and it reveals God so that we can look towards Him, like a veil, right?
Yeah, can you help me just try to connect this to bring this down into like okay, this is the hidden, but like what is this? How does this apply to the halachic man, right? How does this apply to the person that is trying to live their life?
Okay,
Right.
so uh, the halacha. I mean, ultimately, the Misnagdish answer, the Litvish answer, is maybe that it doesn't, because ultimately it doesn't matter, and that's part of the argument that the Rav does make,
Right.
and it's part of the Litvish argument that it's not so important, right, to try to learn these things, because ultimately we have to have of God and a fear of God that is beyond any capacity for us to understand.
Right. I mean, these teachings are kind of like a garment. They can both reveal and hide at the same time. So it's
Exactly. And but what Hasidic philosophy would say, and this is the main difference between Hasidism and, I would say, it's the argument that historically over the past 300 years has won out, is that we see that through the study of these revelations. So there's a famous story told of the Alter Rebbe that, if I remember correctly, it was Reb Baruch of Medjbozh. I forget who exactly came to visit him. And in the city of Liadi, he was traveling towards the Alter Rebbe, and he saw either on a trash heap or in a gutter, somewhere where it didn't belong, a page of Tanya. It had been, because there were many people who were very opposed to printing a lot of these things. You mass publish many of the many of the manuscripts. I mean, the actual Kabbalists, if you were to go to any of the places where actual Kabbalists are studying, they are actually studying texts with manuscripts that have never been printed, right? But certain things were revealed and published and printed, and that included the Tanya, which the Alter Rebbe had printed. And so this rabbi was coming to visit him, and he finds the sheet of Tanya in a place where it obviously does not belong. And he got very mad, and he said to the Alter Rebbe, "Look what is being done to the crown jewels of the Torah. It's being thrown in the streets in the mud." And the Alter Rebbe told him an analogy, told him a mashal. He said there was a king whose son was very sick, and the king brought all the doctors and wise men from all around the world to try to heal his son. And they came, and nobody could heal him, until one person said, "I can heal your son, but I need your crown jewel, right? The jewel at the center of your crown." And the king says, "Of course, take it." And this wise man crushes this jewel and makes into a sort of medicine, and the son, the prince, was so sick that he couldn't even drink this potion, and they had to dribble it on his lips, and most of it fell on the floor. And yet it was kedai, it was worth it for these things to spill on the floor, for these bits of the crown jewel to spill on the floor, so that the child should be healed, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the Hasidic philosophy regarding revealing. So there's a famous letter, it's one of the few writings of the Baal Shem Tov that we have, that he wrote to his brother-in-law, and he said that he had been able to visit a certain heichal in Shamayim, a certain chamber in the heavens, and he had been able to greet Mashiach, and he had asked Mashiach, Emat Ka'ati Mar, when will our teacher come? And Mashiach replied to him, Keshiyafutsu ma'anetecha chutza, when your well springs will spread out to the external, to the extremities, right? And this, I mean, it's a famous song that's sung in Chabad and among Hasidim, and there's I don't know, Ufaratsta, right? Yama v'kedma safona v'negba, right? You shall. So there is a concept in Hasidic philosophy that these teachings inspire a love and fear of God, which brings a person to actually keeping the Torah. And this is, I believe, what the Tzemach Tzedek said to the Chatam Sofer, maybe, but the Tzemach Tzedek was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he said that when the mitnagdim, when the opponents of Hasidism first opposed the Hasidic movement, they had very good reason for it. But once we see that the word Hasid, right, has become synonymous with those people who are most careful, with the people who are most in line and most machmir and most keeping the religion to its highest level, we see b'metziut, we see in through practical
right, pass the test.
Yeah, it beyond pass the test. I mean, you look, the word Hasid has become, like, when you say to anybody on the street, you say a Hasidic Jew, what does he think? He thinks the Jew who's the most, extremely religious, most extremely involved in Torah and mitzvot, right?
Yeah.
And so that, in a very real sense, is the proof that Hasidism, in fact, does achieve what the Rebbeim and have said, which is that through learning these things, people become far more observant of the nigla, right? That which maybe for thousands of years people were able to keep without it, and maybe they should be able to keep without looking into these secrets. But when they do, it in fact heals them of the spiritual maladies we see, And I have to say, thank God, reform never, the lands where reform was completely incapable of penetrating were specifically those lands, including the Sephardic lands, where these teachings, you go to a Sephardic synagogue, and every mincha, before most people arrive, some old man is there reciting Ketichat Eliyahu, so that he can, so that the mourners can say Kaddish when they first come, before mincha even starts.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. This makes me wanna go through the Tanya now.
Tanya, I have to say, Tanya has been a guiding light in my life, and my life has helped me understand Tanya even more than Tanya has helped me understand my life, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
even more incredible. Right? Okay. So, ready to go further?
Yeah.
Okay. Ant hu the kashirlon umehedlon uvgin the ant milgav kol man the afresh chada men chavre me'ilen asar it chashiv le keilu afrish bach. So, and you're the one who binds these and brings them together, because how do they translate uvgin the ant milgav? In as much as you're within them. Anyone who, God forbid, separates one of the 10 from the other 9 is as if he has, God forbid, created some sort of division within God. Ve'ilun asar sfiran, inun azlin kisidran. These are the 10 sfirot, and they go according to their order. Chad arich v'chad katzer v'chad beinoni. So there are 3 columns of the sfirot, and I have my handy dandy chart here of the 10 sfirot, and anyone who is looking at it will look at these 10 sfirot and say, Jacob, there are 11 sfirot here on your chart of 10 sfirot, and I will tell them there are 10 sfirot, not 9, there are 10 sfirot, not 11. Because Keter, Dat, and Malchut are in a very real sense superimpositions of each other, in a way that any partsuf, any representation of the tree of knowledge, or tree of life, only has 10 sfirot, yet it is 10, not 9, and it is 10, not 11.
Yeah, I went through this with I had a Chabad course in my local Chabad, and we were talking about this specifically.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So Keter and Malchut, oftentimes you will not, either Keter or Malchut will be shown, but there are places where Keter and Malchut are shown, but Dat isn't. But that gets into the Partsufim, and that's beyond anything I've even pretended to have studied. Okay. So, but there are 3 columns, right? Chad arich, v'chad katzer, v'chad peinani. One long, one short, and one in the middle. The anthu de anhiglon, and you are the one who rules over them. The late man de anhig lach, and there is nothing which rules over you. La le'ela v'la le'tata v'lo mikol sitra, not above and not below, and not from any manner. Levushin tikant alone, you made them as garments. The minayhu parchen nishmatin livnei nashaf, that from them come souls for man, v'chama gufin tekinat lon, and many bodies you have prepared for them. The itkariu gufa legabe livushin the mechasyan alehon, that are called bodies to clothe these souls in. Ve'itkariu betikunada, and they are called in this manner. Chesed droa yamina. Chesed is the right hand. Gevura droa smala. Gevura is the left hand. Tiferet gufa. Beauty or tiferet is the body. Netzach v'hod train shokin. Netzach and hod are the two legs. V'yesod siyuma de gufa ot brit kodesh. And Yesod is the completion of the body in the sign of the Holy Covenant. Malchut pe Torah sheval pe karinan lon. And Malchut is the mouth, and it is called the oral Torah. In another sense, you could say Malchut is the ground upon which you stand on. Mm-hmm. Chokhmah mocha ihu machshava milkav. So chokhmah, wisdom, is that intellectual aspect which is thought above. Bina liba uva halev mevin. And understanding is the heart, and through it, the heart understands. Right? So chokhmah is that spark. Here, let me show this. Right? So you have the kutso shel yud is keter. Chokhmah is the jot. It's the yod. It's the small spark of inspiration. Bina is the dalid of the hay. It gives it width and height, right? So it takes that spark of chokhmah and gestates it, gives it body. And dat is like another yud, but it's inside. It is what connects the Chabad. It's what connects the intellectual faculties with the emotions. So the 6 emotions are the midot.
Yeah, can you help me understand? Is this comparable to thinking about like the yin and yang, and like the dot is the right?
Dot. So dot is the combination, right, of the masculine and the feminine. Chokhmah is the masculine, bina is the feminine, and dot is that combination which gives birth to. It is the vlad. It is the child of the two.
Got it. And this is tangential, but I mean, this conversation is probably tangential. So.
The whole thing is tangential.
Yes. But I was just listening to Rabbi Breitowitz.
Yeah.
Talking about Shmona Prakim, I think.
Yeah.
And the Rambam talks about and I can't remember because Rabbi Breitowitz was also tangential in that particular conversation. But he was talking about how Chokhmah, and especially from the Chabad perspective, like the court, the specific court, Chabad, they place Chokhmah or intellectual before Bina, or like the Moach Shalet Halev.
One of the explanations of what Chabad Hasidut, as opposed to what the Rebbeim referred to as Chagat, Hasidut, which is Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet, right? Because what distinguishes Chabad Hasidut from all other Hasidic teachings, such as, for example, Likutei Moharan, Breslov, and the teachings of the Rebbe Melech and the Kedushat Levi, right, which are studied by other Hasidic courts, is this concept of a Moach Sholet al Halev.
Yeah.
That the mind has to rule over the body, because when you have a proper orientation, right? Mahshava, your mind receives from kotso shel yud, right? So, from above down, but you can also look at it through this, and you can also look at it with this, right? So the kotso shel yud is ratzon, right? It is keter, is ratzon. And a keter, a crown on your head, it's made out of metal. It's not part of you. It's something completely foreign to you, right? So the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the kotso shel yod, right, is like a crown of your head. And when it's properly oriented on your head, and it comes into your chokhmah, right? You have an inspiration, and then your bina takes and mevin davar mitoch davar, one thing from another, and then your da'at integrates it into your emotions, right? And the 6 midot, the 6 emotions are chagat and nehi, right? Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, right? Then it has a Toleda in Malchut, right? In the actual world, where it becomes practical and becomes something real, and it animates your body. And that's what it means to bring Shem Adnut all the way from Kotso Shel Yud into Hey Tachton, into reality. You're bringing God's will into being in real life.
So this is the process of simplifying it, of kind of like the insight, if I'm thinking about it in Vervakian terms. But so the question is like, Kotso Shel Yud, is something that is like external? Maybe it starts external to you, but and you just said that is the will of God. But is that, how do I know? Like, not all my thoughts, not all my insight, or I mean, they are. I guess. This is where it gets. How do I? Okay, so help me.
No. So of course. So this is what the Mishnah means when it says "Batal retzoncha bifnei retzono," right? So when so we have our ratzon, and then there's God's ratzon. Right? We have our will and God's will, and the correct way to do it, and that's why we study Torah, is to learn and know God's ratzon, right? And in that way, it becomes his ratzon becomes mitlabeshet, becomes enclosed in our thoughts.
Right.
And that's what leads us to actually do his will. And in that way, we have a sort of tefisa, we have a sort of that eternal comes and dwells within us, in that our will has been negated to create a vessel ready to receive his will.
Right. Yeah, I think I understand that. I'm trying to, you're just making things, again, I'm just speaking in simpler terms for me, even though I understand, but you're making things more salient to you. So if you surround yourself with something, then you're more likely to have that become salient, and that is the fountain that comes down to you from your cognition. That is just what is going to be what you're going to think about and see. Yeah. Okay.
And that's in a very real sense, that's Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, right? That Talmud Torah is like all of them, because it is the essence of all of them, in that it brings you the capacity to actually keep any other mitzvah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see how far we can get in this. Okay. Where are we? Okay. So, חוכמה מוחה איהו מחשבה מלגה, בינה ליבה ובה לב המבין, ואילן train כתיב הנסתרות להשם אלוקינו. And regarding these, it says that which is hidden belongs to God, because it's מחשבה. Keter elyon ihu keter malchut, and so the higher crown is the crown of kingship, right? Ve'alei itmar magid mereshit acherit, and that's what it means when it says he says what he says. And that's what it means in Isaiah when it says, how do they translate this? I declare the end from the beginning, right? So Keter and Malchut are superimpositions of each other, because that which God wanted from the very beginning, right? That is in fact the Softa Maaseh B'Machshava Tefila, right?
Right. It's kind of what we spoke about in the Sikha about the light. It was the first thing.
Yeah.
It was created.
Right. So that's the first sikha in Torah studies regarding Genesis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I went into that too. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good one. It's definitely a good one. The ihu orach hatzilut ihu shakyu de ilana bedroa an va'anfoy kemaya de ashke le ilana ve'itrabe bahahu shakyu. And just as water feeds irrigates a tree so that its branches and limbs spread out, in a similar manner, these water the tree that is reality. Okay, we'll go just a little bit more. Ribon ha'olamim antu ilat ha'ilot. You are the cause of all causes. Sibat hasibot. The effects of all effects, I guess they translate. The ashke le'ilana bahahu neviyu, who irrigates the tree in that manner. V'hahu neviyu ihu kenishmata legufa, and that is like a soul in a body. The ihu chayim legufa, that it animates it. Ubach leit dimyon ve'leit diukna mikol ma dilgav ulevar, and there is no similarity in it at all. How do they translate it? But no human likeness or bodily image exists in your infinite essence, with which we might liken you to anything within or without. Let me see. And you created the world and all things. And all the Sephiran have a known name. Uvahon itkiru malachaya, and through them are called the angels. This translation is not exact.
I was just going to mention that one interesting thing that we were talking about in that local Chabad course that I was going through.
Yeah.
Is about not confusing God or the energies of God with the vessels. It's the water that runs through the vessels. I think the analogy that like the visual that the rabbi was going through was like a water wheel, Like you think that the water wheel brings you water, you think the vessels they're just vessels. Those are the things that are the water, but actually it's the fountain or something like that. Really,
Right. So, and this is what it's going on when it says "Va'ant leit lach shem yedia," and you do not have a known name, right? So, anytime where we talk, like we are talking about things which are more ephemeral and spiritual, but they only point to that which is even completely beyond our comprehension. Kind of like the ant farm I always talk about. I've told you about the ant farm, right?
The ant farm?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So imagine I have an ant farm and it's in the sun, right? So if I leave it in the sun, all the ants are going to die because it's going to get hotter and hotter and they're all going to die. Yep. So I move it into the shade. Now imagine the ants in that ant farm. Their home is being shaken up and tunnels are collapsing and they're going from the sun into the darkness and they don't understand at all what's going on. And to the degree that I am able to explain to them that what's going on is something for their own good, right? I can't explain it exactly to them. They're ants, right? And how much more so us in comparison to God, right? Yeah. So if somehow I get a message to the ants, oh, it's all going to be all right. This is actually better for you, right? Than if I had left you in the sun and not collapsed your tunnels and not made you run around like crazy. They don't understand that. And in a similar manner, like God reveals tiny things to our small, tiny brains that in a million times, that is a million times beyond us trying to explain to an ant why we moved his ant farm. Right?
Yeah.
The ant who memale kol shemahan, the ant who shlimu dechulahu, b'chad ant tistalhak minhon ishtaru chulahu kulahu shemahan kegufa b'la nishmata. And you're the one who animates all of these things and fills them, that if for 1 second you were to stop animating them, they would be left like a body without a soul, and even more so because the body would be left. But once God, if God were to remove his animating force, right, everything would cease to exist. Okay, and this was one of the parts I wanted to get to. Ant hakim v'lav b'chokhma yediah. You are wise but not known through wisdom. Ant hu mevin v'lav mibina yediah. You are understanding but not understood through understanding. Leit lach atar yediah. You have no known place. Ela lishta moda tukfach v'chelach livnei nasha. Except through that which you make yourself known, your greatness and your capacities to man. Ula achza lon ech itnahig almin bedina uvrachame. So that to show us how you run the world through justice and mercy. The inun tzedek u'mishpat, which are justice and mercy, kefum uvdehon divnei nasha, like the works of man. Din ihu gevura, justice is gevura. Mishpat amuda de amtzeita, justice. So he's getting into various words.
Why did you want to go through this one specifically? What was the?
Ant chakim v'lav b'chokhma yediah, antu mevin v'lav mebina yediah, leit lach atar yediah. You are wise and not known through wisdom. You are understanding and not right. So
Right.
I think it's an important point when it comes to like even those things through which God reveals himself to us are in effect completely they're like your garments to you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm mentioning for Reiki a lot, but I think there's the example. I think he mentions like I don't know if I get it right, but like you can't explain rationality with rationality, or there's something like that to that extent.
Yeah. I mean, there's any one thing, right? So I think Paul Vanderklay often uses the analogy of, let's say that an author writes himself into his book.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that he is inside the book? No, because the author has an existence that is far beyond any description of himself that he can put into a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Okay. So with that, I think we can go back to the mimer.
To the second line.
Yes. Shehu Reshit Hitgalut or Ein Sof, right? So through all of that, hopefully you understand what he means when he says the Shekhinah is the beginning of the revelation of Or Ein Sof, of the infinite light.
Yeah.
והנה ממה שכותב שראשית התגלות אור אין סוף נקרא בשם שכינה, מובן מזה שעניין שכינה הוא למעלה מעלה מאצילות גם כן. And from this that he says that that he writes that the very beginning of the revelation of Or Ein Sof is called Shekhinah, right? You can understand that actually when we talk about Shekhinah, right, it's even beyond, we're even talking beyond the Kotzo Shel Yud.
Yeah.
We're talking beyond any emanation, right? Because the Partsufim, right, there are the four worlds, Atzilut, Briar, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, right? So even as the Sfirot are enclosed in the world of emanation, right? Which in a sense is still pure divinity, because the break between Atzilut and Bria is a huge break between emanation and creation, right? But when he says that it's the beginning of the revelation of Or Ein Sof, we see that we're even talking above Atzilut.
Right.
Verstehst? Yes. Okay. Did you want to ask something?
I want to ask a lot of things, but no, nothing specific.
Okay. גם בבחינת האור שלפני הצמצום. Even at a level of light that's before tzimtzum, that's before constriction, right? So hopefully, I mean, you know what constriction is. Shaharei reshit hitgalut hu be'or ein sof shelifnei hatzimtzum, right? So the light is that which comes into the, so you have the constriction which creates the darkness into which the light comes. So when you're talking about the beginning, you're talking about this, the beginning of the light, which is at a higher level than constriction at all,
Yeah.
וכמו שכתוב כבוד קדושת אדמו"ר האמצעי, the Mittler Rebbe, so this is the second Chabad rabbi, כי הארת הקו והחוט לגבי עצמיות אור אינסוף נקרא בשם שכינה. That's the revelation of the line and the thread regarding the very essence of the infinite light is called Shekhinah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that very first beam of light that comes into the world, right? It's from beyond even Tzimtzum, right?
Right.
And that is called Shekhinah. Ki inyan Shekhinah hu b'chol makom lefi inyano. Because when we talk about Shekhinah, we're always talking in regard to the aspect of it, right? So when you refer to the Shekhinah and you're talking about Or Ein Sof and Tzimtzum, right? So the very beginning of Tzimtzum, that's called Shekhinah. But when, for example, we're talking about the Partsufim of Asiyah, right? So we may even by Shekhinah, we often are actually talking about Malchut of Asiyah, right? Which is the lowest sphere, right? Because the concept of Shekhinah is in relationship to what you're talking about. Clear?
So it exists on the higher and on the lower level.
Right. It's kind of like when you say the bottom of what? Mm-hmm. Right? The bottom of the stairs or the bottom of my second story, I'm on the second floor here. Right. The bottom of my door or the bottom of the stairs downstairs. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. לגבי אצילות, הנה המלכות נקרא בשם שכינה. So when we talk about Atzilut, the worlds of emanation, when we talk about Malchut, that is called Shekhinah. וגם בזה, מה שמלכות דאצילות נקרא שכינה, מבאר כבוד קדושת אדמו"ר הצמח צדק. So he's actually going from Rebbe to Rebbe. So he talked about the Alter Rebbe, and then he talked about the Mittler Rebbe, who's the second rabbi, mm-hmm. And the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the third Rebbe, right? שזהו דווקא כמו שנעשית בחינת עתיק לעולם הבריאה. So when you talk about Malchut of Asiyah, right, of Atzilut, sorry, then when you talk about the worlds of Bria, then that Malchut becomes Keter, or Atik is the literally it means ancient, but we're talking about Keter of Bria, right? Mm-hmm. So Malchut of the Malchut of Atzilut is the Keter of Bria, right, and the Malchut of Bria becomes the Keter of Yetzirah.
Right, that's the 4 or 3 emanations, or like the worlds, or I forgot.
The 4 worlds, yes. The four. Yeah, so there's Atzilut, emanation, the worlds of emanation, the worlds of creation, Bria, the worlds of formation, Yetzirah, and the worlds of action, or Asiyah. Okay? Aval bihiyota ba'atzilut, hi meyuchedet imahem. But when it is in Atzilut itself, it is unified with them. That is the other spirot of Atzilut. The lo shayach lashon shchina. then it can't be referred to as Shekhinah. Umikol makom, ein ze soter lama shekatuv la'il. This does not contradict with what we said before. Shahakav nikra b'shem Shekhinah, that the line is which is above Keter of Atzilut is called Shekhinah. Ki Shekhinah shneimar divrei Razal hainu malchut de Atzilut. Because when we're talking about when the sages talk about Shekhinah, they're actually referring to malchut of Atzilut. So he's going back to, now we're talking about Shekhinah when we're talking about the Midrash Rabbah, saying that the Ikar Shekhinah is what was at the beginning. Va'af gam zot rak keshena'asit bechinat atik lebriya davka. But even that, it is referred, that is Shekhinah, called Shekhinah when in its aspect of being Keter of Bria, right? Being Atik of Bria, specifically. Aval b'shorsha, but in its very source, Hayinu kamo shahu legabe or Ein Sof, that is in respect to its relationship with the infinite light. Hine gam hakav nikra b'shem Shekhinah. That in that manner, we can also refer to, not like this, we can refer not to the malchut of Atzilut, but to the kav above Atzilut as Shekhinah. Ve'echad hatamim ma shahakav nikra Shekhinah. When one of the reasons why kav is called in by the name of Shekhinah legabe or Ein Sof, katav kedushas kavod kedushat admor Maharash. So this is the fourth Rabbi Shmuel, who was the fourth Chabad Rebbe. Lefi shahakav kavanat hamshachto bishvil sheyitlabesh beolamot beolamot what is that thing? What is that? So I am going to cheat and go to the English. Chapter 1. The Rebbe Maharash writes that one of the reasons why the Kav is called Shekhinah in relation to the Ein Sof is that the Kav is drawn down in order to become enclosed in the worlds. Oh, but Nishmat Israel. Okay. That's what I was missing. Okay. It's called Shekhinah Lefi Shahakav Kavanat Hamshachto, right? The reason for it is so that it could enclose itself into the worlds all the way down into the souls of Israel, right? Nishmat Israel. That lachen hine gam bereshito nikra b'shem Shekhinah. And therefore, even at the very beginning, because that is the reason for it, it's still called by that name of Shekhinah. V'lamala yoter Shekhinah b'shorsho harishon lamala meham tzimtzum. V'lamala yoter Shekhinah b'shorsho harishon lamala meham tzimtzum. And it is, what did the English say? it is therefore termed Shekhinah even at its outset. Okay, I'm not exactly understanding this. B'shem Shekhinah. V'lamala yoter Shekhinah b'shorsho harishon lamala mem tzimtzum. Okay, so in the when we're talking about in the shoresh, in the very root, right? It's beyond even tzimtzum, but in each case we are talking about how it's revealing itself to come down into the next level, all the way down. Mevar kavod kedushas atmor nishmato eden. And the reason why he's referring to the Rebbe Rashab as Admor Nishmato Eden is because that's how the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe referred to the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was his father, right? The Rebbe Rashab. Shegilui haor kamo shahu Now I am going to have to look at the English again. Oh, lifnei hatzimtzum. Okay. Shegilui haor kamo shahu lifnei hatzimtzum. So the revelation of the light as it is before the tzimtzum, before the constriction, nikra b'shem shechina. שבכללות האור שלפני הצמצום יש בו 3 מדרגות, because included in the light before the constriction, there are 3 levels: עצם האור, והתפשטות האור, וההתפשטות האור שני מדרגות גילוי האור שני. So there's the very essence of the light itself, the extension of the light, and a second extension of the light. These are 3 different levels that are included in the light itself. Madrigot gilui haor kemo shahu la'atzmo, the revelation of the light as it exists in itself, shezehu mekor or hasovev, that is the place of the transcendent light, which does, so there's sovev and memale, right? So sovev is that which is transcendent and does not get entangled in that which it reflects upon. V'gilui ha'or la'atzmo hashayach laha'olamot shezehu mekor or hamemale. And then there's the revelation of the light to itself, which is pertinent to the worlds. That is the or mamale, that is the encompassing light, the filling light, right? So the first is as it is completely transcendent, then as it is filling mamale, right? V'gilui ha'or hazen nikra b'shem shechina, and this revelation, and I think this is the second of the 3 levels that he said, that is referred to as Shekhinah. Va'af shehu lifnei hatzimtzum, and even though it is before the constriction, ve'i efshar sheyihyeh mekor la'olamot, and it's not possible to say that it is the beginning of the worlds, shelachen hutzrach lihyot hatzimtzum, because for that it would have to be within the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum would have to cut, because the olamot were created in the tzimtzum, right? The worlds were created within constriction. V'tzimtzum harishon shehu bechinat siluk davka. So the first constriction is that the withdrawal of God specifically. Mikol makom nikra b'shem shchina. Still, it can be referred to as shchina, which is the opposite of siluk. V'zehu diuk halashon ikar shchina. And this is what we are talking about when we talk about ikar shchina, when the Midrash Rabbah talks about the essence of the shchina, betachtonim haita, was in the lower worlds. Ha'inu shegilui hashchina betachtonim hu lo hashchina shehu legabe atzilut, ha'inu malchut, right? So when we are talking about the ikar shchina being in the lower worlds, we're not talking about the shchina as it exists in regard to the worlds of emanation, that is malchut, right? Gam lo kemo shehu legabe or ein sof, also not according to how it is with regard to the infinite light. Hayinu haka ki im ikar upnimiut hashchina hayta betachtonim davka. So what we're not talking about these higher levels, which are also referred to as shchina, but we're talking about shchina as it is in the tachtonim, in the nether worlds specifically. Ki ha'or shenitlabesh be'olamot harehu ba beseder v'hadraga. Because the light, as it is enclosed in the world, it has an order and levels to it. But above these things, it has a greater revelation. And the more that it is drawn down and enclosed itself, it becomes, the light decreases. And that is generally how it is when we talk about the order of hishtalshalut, of how do you translate seder hishtalshalut? The order of the chain of events.
Is this kind of like reflecting what we were talking about? Because it says that the light becomes stronger. So is this kind of like the descent for the sake of ascent, in terms of like?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. He's starting in this first chapter, he's explaining how there are various levels of Shekhinah, right? And the light, as it comes, it descends, it itself is mitma'et, becomes lessened, right? But Shekhinah, and I think in the further chapters, he's going to continue this and reveal, like, in a similar manner, things are brought down, but when we're talking about Shekhinah, we're talking about revelation. So wherever we're talking about it, right, at that level, the revelation is what's called Shekhinah. Yeah. Okay? I think, hopefully I'm understanding this correctly. My marim are not easy to understand. Ve'af shekodem hachet haya gam lamata ha'or begilui. And even before the sin of the tree, the light was even in in the lower worlds revealed. Mikol makom haya gam az gilui haor yoter lamala. But still, it was the greater revelation was above. Kamamar Razal, Nata Yamino Uvara Shamayim, right? God, like the sages said, that God stretched out his right hand and created the heavens. Nata Smolo Uvara Aretz. He stretched out his left hand and he created the land. Ela hakavana al haor shalamala me'olamot ikar shchina. But when we are talking about the light that is above all worlds, that is the true essence of the Shekhinah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is tough.
Yeah.
Like
so, I mean, basically, what he's trying to explain is when Razal, when the sages say that Ikar Shechina, where the Ikar Shechina was, Hakavana al Haor Shalamala Me'olamot. It's talking about that light which is beyond all the worlds and really before the Tzimtzum. And that's what it means, that place where I was at the very beginning.
Right. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm understanding this at a certain level, but it's like I'm not able to connect it to anything yet.
Well, I mean, it's just beginning.
Right. Yeah.
This is chapter 1, and so far all he's done is he's set up, and part of what he's done is set up by, I mean, this is his inaugural speech, right? He started with each of the Rebbeim, and he's explaining how each of them explained this concept of Shekhinah, right?
Right.
And then he's going to continue and, yeah.
So I'm fine being patient, but I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it explained why is it important for like why is he trying to tell us about what is called Shekhinah?
Yeah. Ultimately, yes. By the time you get, yes. So he's going to, yes. This is, in essence, this is this speech set the it was kind of like his agenda for his nesiut, for his leadership, and everything he did. There's a famous story that so when this Baati L'Gani first came out, it was a copy of it was shown to supposedly the Rav, and the Rav took a look at it, and supposedly what he said, it's not clear, is that Meshugana thinks he's the Mashiach. And Hasidim supposedly responded, the Rav is half right.
Okay, interesting. I can't see why you said that yet, so I'm curious.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll be clear by the end.
But okay. I mean, yeah, I can have some.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could stop here, or we could keep on going until the end of the hour. Or if you want to ask questions on anything until now, it's up to you.
let's keep going because this one
Okay.
looks like it's more.
Okay. Yeah, it hopefully, I mean, part of the reason we're doing this is because I'm hoping to go through like very essential stuff. And that's, I mean, we certainly have been doing that so far. And eventually we won't be doing essential stuff anymore. We'll be doing okay. Vehine ze de'ikar. Do you want to try reading?
I can, yeah. I mean, I can definitely try reading because it's
Okay.
kind of like Hebrew. You can. I don't want you to do the whole thing, and
Sure.
you can correct me.
Okay.
והנה זה דעיקר שכינה בתחתונים הייתה, מבואר מהמדרש לתחתונים, כאי
koi. Yeah, that's an Aramaic word which means is regarding to. Shayach.
Koi?
Yeah.
Koi al olam ze hagishmi?
Olam has a gashmi, yeah.
עולם הזה הגשמי.
Yeah.
וכמו שמבאר,
דעל
ידי חטא עץ הדת, נסתלקה השכינה מארץ לרקיע.
Right.
So, כמה השכינה בתחתונים הייתה?
So the Dalet is basically a shin in Aramaic. Mm-hmm. So that's how he's using it. You can basically just replace it with a shin and it becomes Hebrew, right?
Okay, yeah, and then translate it to English. I mean, this is a good skill that I need to get better at. But yeah, so it says that the Shekhinah is its essence is in the, or it's mostly in the Tachtonim, in the lower world, in the nether worlds.
And this that it says that it was, right? Mavor.
It says from the Midrash.
It is clarified through the Midrash. Right? So this that we said Ikar Shechina is Batachtonim Haita, right? Mm-hmm. This can be understood from what the Midrash says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what the Midrash says, Koi al olam hazeh gishmi.
Yeah. So this word Tachtonim, this word nether, right? Tachtonim, it's talking about our material world, physical world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like it is also clarified in by the sin of the tree.
That through the sin of the tree,
the sin of the tree, the Shekhinah was removed or moved from the earth to the sky or to
right.
Yeah. Okay, I have flashbacks from like second grade. ועל ידי מתן תורה על הר סיני באתי לגני לגנוני. And through or by the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, I came to my garden. And leganoni, what is the difference here?
Ganoni, so my bridal chamber, that place where I belong. Right. So so when we're talking about the Tachtonim, we're talking about this material world, and so before the sin of the tree, the Shekhinah was in this material world, and it was removed because of the sin to the heavens, and Matan Torah brought it back to where it belongs. It's where it was in the beginning.
Right. And does this correspond to like the different worlds that it was like? Because is it like the Torah? Is it's enclosed in a certain way through the Torah?
So all of this we are talking about is in Asiyah. All of this is in Asiyah, because first of all, when you talk about Atzilut, Atzilut is pure emanation, and there's a break. So there's not even a capacity for us to affect Atzilut at all. There's a real break between Atzilut and the other worlds.
Yeah.
Bria is still Ruchani, right? And in fact, it is the roots, the spiritual roots of pretty much everything. Through Yetzirah, so that's Bria, Yesh Mi'ayin, and then Yetzirah is Yotzer, right? Is forms, and then in Asiyah, we are able to actually affect it, right? Yeah. So the sin of the tree is referring to what happens in Asiyah, in the world of
right. It was removed from the material, from Asiyah, from the material, from the Gashmi.
Well, okay. So even the Rakia is ultimately in Asiyah, right? So the removal was from Aretz to Rakia, but all of that is in Asiyah. The 7 Rakiot, right? The seven levels of heaven, those are still in Asiyah. Those are still in the worlds of action.
Yeah. Okay. ועיקר הסילוק שנעשה על ידי החטא הוא בחטא עץ הדת דווקא. And the main expulsion and the main removal that was done in sin was done in the sin of specifically in the sin of the
tree of knowledge. Yeah.
Tree of knowledge. וכמו שבעניין החטא, הרי עיקר החטאים היה חטא עץ הדת. And in terms of the sin,
when we're talking about the concept of sin, right? The main sin is always through a sin of the tree of knowledge.
Ikar, yeah. So Ikar is usually the main thing. Yeah. שהרי על ידי חטא עץ הדת היה נתינת מקום לשאר החטאים. That through the sin of the tree of knowledge, there became space for the rest of all of the sins. וחטא עץ הדת היה סיבה וגורם לחטאים דקין ואנוש וכו'. And the sin of the tree of knowledge was the reason and cause for the sins of Cain and Enosh and
all else.
Yeah. כמו כן, הוא בפעולת החטא. הסילוק שנעשה על ידי החטא, הנה עיקר הסילוק הוא מה שנסתלק על ידי חטא עץ הדעת, מהעולם זה התחתון, דווקא, this one is a tough one.
Right. No. So when we talk about this removal of the Shekhinah, right, from so there's a special difference between that first removal that once we're talking about the 7 Rekiot, right, you're already like those things are kind of alu va'alu. It's not the same type of removal as that first removal from land to heaven.
Right. כמו כן הוא בפעולת החטא, הסיוק שנעשה על ידי החטא, הנה עיקר הסיוק הוא משם מי נסתלק על ידי חטא מאוד תחתון, דווקא דקשם שעיקר שכינה בתחתונים הוא בעולם הזה דווקא, הנה כמו כן, הוא בהסילוק דעיקר סילוק הוא מי שנסתלקה מהארץ דווקא, שזה נעשה על ידי חטא עץ הדת, שעל ידי זה נסתלקה השכינה מארץ לרקיע, וזהו גם כן הטעם שאינו מצרף במאמר. So what we just said about how the tree of knowledge was the cause for the removal of the Shekhinah from the earth to the sky. וזהו גם כן הטעם שאינו מצרף. What is the טעם? What is
that's the same reason why
reason
that he doesn't include chet etz hadat im hachataim dekain ve'enosh. So that's I'm guessing that, I mean, that it sounds like this is in relation to what the Frierdiker Rebbe said in his Ma'amar. He speaks separately about the sin of the tree from the other sins that are described, like when we're talking about Cain and Enosh, right? V'choshev zeh befi atzmo. It's something that is important and needs to be discussed by itself.
By itself, yeah. לפי שבחטאים דקין ואנוש נסתלקה השכינה מרקיע לרקיע. Because the sins of Cain and Enosh, the Shekhinah was removed from sky, from heaven to heaven.
Right.
As opposed to earth to heaven.
Right.
מה שאין כן בחטא עץ הדת שנסתלקה מארץ לרקיע.
Exactly.
שלבד זאת שהסילוק מהארץ, זה בעיקר נוגע לנו. הנה זהו גם עיקר עניין הסילוק.
Right? Because since this is the movement of the Shekhinah from the land, right, where we are, that's what has to do with us. That's the most important one, right? The fact that the Shekhinah is moving from one Rikia to another Rikia, right? That's not as Nogea, it's not as connected to our daily lives as that first siluk.
So why wouldn't the sin of of Cain would, like, is it just saying it's a lesser, but
it's
like,
it's not that first sin, right? So what he's going to be talking about a lot, I mean, the whole thing is about the generations, right? So like that first generation, Adam and Eve, their sin brought sin into the world, right? And removed the Shekhinah from the land, right? And then there were further sins of Cain and Enosh, and right? And those moved the Shekhinah further and further away. But there is a qualitative difference to that first one, because it's Ma'aretz L'Rakia, because it's from the ground, the what we live in, to the heavens.
Right. So first of all, when he says heaven to heaven, he means the seven heavens. This is like it ascends, let's say, right, or it becomes further away.
Right.
Okay, and he's trying to focus us on the first sin that was like, and I guess we'll try to understand why that is important.
Yeah. That's so. Just to give you a little thing into the future, especially since we're almost done, he's going to talk about how our job as the seventh generation, because he was the seventh Rebbe, is to bring the Shekhinah from this Rekia La'aretz, right? And that's why Kol, and he's going to be talking about Kol Hashvin Chavivin, right? Mm-hmm. There's an essential difference between that which was the work of his Nesiut, the work of his leadership, was something that, even though, like, I mean, obviously each sin that is nistalek hashchina, that causes the shchina to leave, like, oh, okay, that's doing something, right? And every time we cause shirui shchina, right, that's something.
Yeah.
But this movement, there is an essential movement from Eretz l'Rakia and Rakia la'aretz, which is fundamentally different than any of the other movements.
So is he going to say that there are things that we can do to move things from heaven to heaven, but there are specific things that will get it from the heaven to the earth?
That's an interesting question. We'll see. I think ultimately what his whole thing was that this generation is the seventh, and the seventh generation needs to finish up the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, I can see how it's difficult to be his predecessor after something like that. You don't want to.
Well, this is one of the reasons why why Chabad does not have another one, because the question becomes, like, okay, if this is the work of the seventh generation,
mm-hmm.
And what he says later in the Maimer is that there has been a tradition that there would be only seven. That there would only be seven Chabad Rebbeim.
Right.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe this is a good place to stop.
Yeah. I'll see you at the book club.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Thanks again for going through this.
Thank you. My pleasure. I'm going to end